Ansel Gray climbed down into his cellar on a Dakota claim in October of 1880 and counted what $11 had bought him. 200 glass jars, 4 stone crocks, a barrel of salt pork, a bin of sand with 60 pounds of carrots sleeping in it, 90 pounds of flour, a crock of eggs under lime water, and 2 hams hanging from the joists. 8 days later, the first blizzard came, a month early. By January, the train stopped and did not come back until May. The town down the road burned its fence posts and ground its seed, wheat, and coffee mills. When the store shelves went empty in February, the Gray table set 3 meals. When the last train hope died in March, the Gray table set 3 meals. 7 months, 3 children. Nobody in that house went to bed hungry once. Today, the average American kitchen holds about 3 days of food and a telephone full of delivery apps. We call that progress. But here's the twist, friend. Ansel Gray was not rich and he was not lucky. Every trick in that cellar was ordinary, printed in government bulletins, taught to 12-year-olds, done in a million kitchens. Those tricks are not lost. They are not even hidden. They just do not have a price tag on them anymore. And that turns out to be the only reason you never learned them. Because inside the fences of the plain people, every one of them is still being done. I am Jonas Lapp, Old Order, 6th generation on the same Lancaster County ground my family has farmed since 1791. I do not own this camera. A young English neighbor runs it, and the two of us made our peace about why the old ways are dying outside, and somebody ought to say so. Most of what I am about to walk you through, my grandfather Amos kept in a ledger from 1938 to the year he died. He made me promise at his kitchen table that these ways would not die with me. This is me keeping my word. Some of what is coming, they would rather you never relearned. Number 17 is a corn trick the South forgot, and the forgetting put 100,000 Americans in the ground before a government doctor proved what killed them. Starting in 1914, number 11 cooks a full supper with the fire already out. The United States Army was using it to feed men in 1916. And the appliance trade buried it by 1971. And number 4, friend, number 4 stores 500 pounds of potatoes in a hole you dig in one afternoon for the price of a bale of straw. Nobody outside our fences has taught it in 50 years. None of these 25 faded because they quit working. They faded because somebody got paid the day your family forgot them. That is not on you, neighbor. They are good at selling. Before we count down, tap subscribe. Not for me, because we are pulling buried kitchen knowledge back into daylight here, 1 skill a week, and you will want the next one. 25.5 down to 1. The question is not what we lost. The question is who profited when we forgot and how you take it back. Picture your great-grandfather in November, kneeling over a wooden box in the cellar, laying carrots down in damp sand the way you would lay a child down. A layer of sand, a layer of carrots, never touching. Beets in one box, turnips in another. That box held 60 pounds of roots crisp until April. Cost him a busted crate and a bucket of creek sand? Nothing. Today, a refrigerator with a crisper drawer runs $1,200 at the appliance store. Hums all night, and your carrots still go rubber in 3 weeks. General Electric and Frigidaire did not outlaw the sandbox. They just wired the countryside after 1936 and put a white steel box in every kitchen until the wooden one looked like poverty. The state extension services still publish root storage charts, carrots in damp sand at 32 to 40 degrees, 4 to 6 months. The knowledge is sitting in public documents right now. The carrot did not change, friend. The bill did. That one they replaced with a plug. The next one they replaced with a lie about freshness. An Ohio farm wife in 1910, sitting by the stove on an October evening, wrapping apples one at a time in squares of newspaper and setting them in a barrel, not touching, stem up, cellar bound. One bruised apple wrapped in paper cannot rot its neighbors. That barrel ate like October until Easter. Cost, the newspaper she had already read. Now here is what the produce aisle does not print on the sign. The supermarket runs on controlled atmosphere storage, sealed warehouses, low oxygen. And an apple can legally sit in one for 6 months to a year before you buy it fresh. Nobody banned the barrel. The cold storage trade just made year-old fruit look like this morning. The old horticulture bulletins laid it out plain. Wrapped, cool, dark, winter apples keep. Same fruit. No warehouse. Your great-grandmother's apples were 4 months old and she told you so. Theirs are 10 months old and they call it fresh. That one they marketed over. The next one hung from the porch rafters and nobody under 70 remembers its name. Walk onto an Ozark porch in September of 1930 and look up. Strings of green beans threaded on cotton thread with a darning needle. hanging in the shade to dry, rattling like paper by November. The old people called them leather britches, shell beans of air and time. Come January, a handful dropped in a pot with a piece of side meat and simmered slow all afternoon. That is a supper men worked all day on. Bread. The beans were coming out of the garden anyway. Del Monte and the canning giants did not ban a string of beans. Home economics classes just quietly stopped teaching food drying after the war, and by 1970 an American child could name 10 cereal mascots. And not one way to keep a bean. The National Center for Home Food Preservation still publishes drying guidance today: beans, corn, apples, herbs. Federal money keeping alive what the schools dropped. They did not take the skill from your grandmother, they just never handed it to your mother. That one they stopped teaching. The next one your great-grandmother did in a crock, and the modern food safety people will tell you not to. I will give you both sides straight. Oregon, 1917. A woman in a checked apron slides 8 dozen fresh eggs into a stoneware crock of lime water. The Utah Agricultural College printed the method that same year, circular number 25, saying the practice had already passed the experimental stage. Hens quit laying in winter. The crock did not. Eggs into spring for pennies of pickling lime. Now the honest part, because I promised you the line. The Modern Extension Services Utah State put out a fact sheet in 2023, tell you not to do this today, and their reason is real: salmonella. But hear the detail they bury in the footnote. The old method worked on unwashed eggs, straight from the nest, with the hen's own protective bloom. Every store egg in America is washed naked by law. The old way did not stop working, friend. The egg they sell you stopped qualifying. If your eggs come from a store, use the refrigerator they sold you. If they come from a coop, now you know what the crock was for. The Plain families on my road still put eggs down in lime every October from their own hens with the bloom on. That one they scared you off of. The next one they replaced with a $300 hum. A Kentucky hillside, 1915. A little stone hut squats over the coldest spring on the farm. Water slides through a rock trough, and crocks of milk, butter, and cream sit down in the current, holding at about 45 degrees through August. No wire, no bill, never once broke down in 80 years. And for the family with no spring, a wet cloth over a crock in the draft of a window. Moving air, evaporating water, 10 to 15 degrees of free cold. Aid organizations still teach that exact physics in hot countries today with clay pots. Then General Electric shipped the monitor top refrigerator in 1927 at around $300, making the old cold look like something to be ashamed of. The spring never sent a bill. The spring never needed a repairman on a Sunday. They did not build a better cold, neighbor. They built a cold you rent. That one they replaced with an appliance. The next one is alive, and the store version is dead on purpose. Pennsylvania, October 1925. A grandmother shreds 50 pounds of cabbage into a 10-gallon crock, salts it, packs it down with a wooden stomper until the brine rises over the top, sets a plate and a boiled riverstone on top, and walks away. 3 weeks later, sauerkraut. Enough for a winter, alive with the same cultures. Cost? Cabbage and salt. Call it $1. The jarred kraut on the store shelf today is pasteurized, heated until every living culture in it is dead. Because dead food ships better and sits on a shelf longer. You are paying $4 a jar for the cabbage and losing the very thing the crock was for. Modern nutrition journals have spent the last decade publishing review after review on fermented foods and the gut. Your great-grandmother had the crock.
And there are crocks working in half the cellars on my road tonight. They sold you the kraut and kept the life out of it.
Now hold on, first pattern break, friend. Notice the shape of what we have walked through. 6 tricks in, and not one of them was outlawed. A plug replaced the sandbox. A warehouse replaced the barrel. A school book dropped the beans. Every single one, somebody got paid. And it does not get gentler from here, it gets sharper. Number 17, the corn trick that filled 100,000 graves, is 4 items away. A Virginia smoke shed, December 1902. Your great-great-grandfather packs cut pork into an oak barrel, a layer of meat, a layer of coarse salt. Then floods it with brine strong enough to float an egg, lays a board on top, and weights it with a scrubbed stone. That barrel held a family's protein. No wire in the wall, no motor in the corner. Then came 1906 and the Federal Meat Inspection Act, written for the big Chicago packing houses, who lobbied for rules they could afford while drowning the small men. Within a generation, meat meant a wrap package and the barrel became firewood. The United States Department of Agriculture still documents salt curing as an effective preservation method. The barrel was never the danger, the competition was.
That one they regulated sideways. The next one they zoned out of your backyard. Stand inside a log smokehouse in Tennessee, 1920.
Rafters black with 30 winters of hickory. Hams hanging on cords in a cool gray fog off a smoldering pit fire. Salt and smoke kept meat a year. With not 1 ampere of electricity, Washington mailed out the recipe free in old farmers' bulletins. Then town fire codes and zoning ordinances made it a permit problem, while the Packers' descendants sold you water-injected ham in plastic at $9 a pound. The federal bulletin is still online, friend. They just stopped mentioning it.
That one they zoned. The next one is the corn trick, the one I promised you. And it is the heaviest thing in this whole countdown. Here it is.
An Alabama kitchen yard, 1890. A woman boils dried field corn in a pot with wood ash lye, hulls slipping loose, kernels swelling white and sweet. Hominy. Every old cook in the South knew it. Here is why it mattered. Corn carries its niacin locked up unless it meets alkali. The lye pot set it free. Then, around 1901, new mill machinery rolled through the South, cheap and pretty and stripped. The lye pot went quiet. And between 1906 and 1940, pellagra, the disease of the 4 Ds, struck 3 million Americans and put 100,000 of them in the ground. In 1914, a federal health agency sent a pioneering physician south, and he proved it against a decade of ridicule.
It was the stripped corn.
Fortification finally ended it in the 1940s. Read that again, neighbor. 100,000 graves sit between the old way and the new mill. The grandmother with the ash pot was right, and the modern mill was wrong, and it took the government 40 years to admit it. That one they replaced. The next one they did not bury. They shamed it out of your kitchen by name. Kansas, Hog Killing Day, 1935. Your great-grandmother cubes the back fat, renders it slow in a cast kettle, skims cracklings for the children, and pours 5 gallons of clean white lard into stone crocks. Cost her nothing extra. Then Procter & Gamble put Crisco on the shelf in 1911, hydrogenated cottonseed oil, and spent 2 generations teaching America grandma's kettle would kill you. And then the New England Journal of Medicine, 2006, industrial trans fats came out worse for the heart than the lard ever was. The kettle was the scapegoat. They sold you shame in a can, and it took medicine 95 years to apologize. That one they shamed. The next one is older than Egypt. A Missouri kitchen, 1880. A crock of flour and water on the warming shelf fed a handful of flour a day, bubbling with wild yeast out of the air. Some starters handed down bride to bride for 50 years. Bread every week from 3 ingredients and patience. No store in the loop at all. Fleischmann's and the factory yeastmen sold speed. By mid-century, the home loaf was a hobby and the starter crock was a curiosity. Because a nickel packet was faster and the bread wagon came Tuesdays. Every artisan bakery charging you $9 a loaf right now is charging you for the starter. The starter never died, neighbor. It is in the $9 loaf, wearing a French name. Second pattern break, and this one, I owe you something personal. Everything so far your great-grandmother could have taught you in one autumn. What is coming next is the stretch where the factory men earned their fortunes. The bread, the cans, the cubes, the cookers. And I will tell you now, not everything down list is for everybody, and where there is a food safety line, I will put your hand on it. 10 left before the one that is not a trick at all. Flour, water, salt, and a slow oven, pressed into thick crackers, baked hard as shingles. Pilot bread, ship's biscuit, the bread that crossed every ocean and every prairie, because kept dry, it does not spoil on any timeline that matters. There are Civil War hardtack crackers sitting whole in museum cases right now, 160 years old. Then Continental Baking rolled out Wonder Bread in 1921. And the marketing men taught the country a new religion. Soft equals fresh. And the bread that could not spoil got replaced by the bread that could not last a week. That one they marketed over. The next one turns a September orchard into a January candy drawer. A Lancaster attic, October 1928. Rings of apple threaded on twine, schnitz swaying over the warm chimney stone. Pumpkin rings on broom handles. Peach halves down flat on a screen in the sun. By Christmas, chewy, honey sweet, and the closest thing a farm child had to store candy. Cost, twine and sunshine. Walk the snack aisle now. A 4-ounce pouch of freeze-dried apple runs $8, $32 a pound for what the attic did free, with Pioneer on the label. Zero equipment beyond a needle, thread, and a dry room. $32 a pound for the trick the attic knew. That one they priced out. The next one your family sealed under white gold. A stone crock on a cellar shelf, 1900. Cooked sausage laid down in layers and hot rendered lard poured over. Until the meat vanished under an inch of white seal. Air is the enemy, the fat is the door. Shut. Down cellar, cold months, that crock fed breakfast to March. The French charge you $19 a tin for the same idea and call it confit. Underwood was canning potted meats in 1870, and now the line, plainly, the fat seal is a barrier, not a magic spell. Use your refrigerator, keep the crock cold, eat it in weeks, and cook it through. That one they canned. The next one is the promise number 11, supper with the fire out. A farm kitchen, 1917. A wooden box packed tight with hay. A pot of beans boiled hard for 10 minutes, then lowered into the nest, lid on, hay over, box shut, and the woman of the house drives to town. 6 hours later, she lifts the lid on beans cooked soft as Sunday in a kitchen that burned no fuel all afternoon. Farmer's Bulletin 771. The government begged families to build them during the war to save fuel. Then Rival shipped the crock pot in 1971 and sold 4 decades of America a plug-in hay box. A cooler, a towel, a hot pot, you could run this trick tonight. The Army knew, friend. Somebody just liked you better on the meter. The next one simmered on the back of every stove until a cube in foil talked it off. The back burner of a wood range, 1910. Every bone, carrot end, and onion skin into the pot. Free soup base forever. Gelatin thick enough to set a spoon upright from bones the butcher threw in for nothing.
Then Maggie and the cube men industrialized it around 1908, and by mid-century the stock pot was quaint and the cube was cooking. Read the label, salt first.
Meanwhile, the fashionable food press spent the last decade selling the farm stock pot back to the cities at $9 a quart under the name bone broth. Now, third pattern break, and it is the one where I tell a story on myself. I was 13 the first time Amos let me run the kraut crock alone.
I salted by guess, packed it loose, and 3 weeks later lifted the plate on a grey, sulphur-smelling mush with a scum cap like a swamp.
Even the dog backed away from it. The old man said, "The brine is the law, boy. Under the brine, nothing goes wrong that matters." Took me 3 crocks to earn that sentence, and I have never lost a batch since. There is only shame in the not trying. 9 left. A Tennessee bottom field, October 1900. Cane sorghum standing 8 feet tall, a mule walking circles at a press, green juice running to a pan over a fire. And by nightfall, thick amber syrup. A family sweetening for a year from one patch of ground. Then the Sugar Trust made white sugar so cheap the mule stopped. County by county, the press is rusted. A working sorghum mill today is a festival attraction. The syrup itself never lost the argument. That one they priced. The next one, the government wrote a label rule around in 1998. Windfall apples, 1890, the bruised ones, pressed to cider. And a crock where peels, cores, and yesterday's cider went to become vinegar. Self-renewing, cost of nothing. Then the Food and Drug Administration's juice rules. Pushed raw pressed cider to the margins, and the roadside barrel became a liability. The apple did not get more dangerous, neighbor. The middleman got more necessary. That one they regulated. The next one is growing in your yard right now, and you have been poisoning it since 1945. A spring morning, 1930. Your great-grandmother walks the fence line with a knife and a bowl. Dandelion greens before the flower, lamb's quarters, purslane. Spring tonic, free for the bending down. Then Scots and the chemical trade spent decades teaching America that the most nutritious plant was an enemy. Whole subdivisions now pay one company to kill dandelions and another $4 a clamshell for spring mix. The weed was never the problem. That one they shamed with a spreader. The next one they replaced with a hum after 10,000 men with saws fed a nation's cold. A January lake in Maine, 1890. Men cutting blue blocks out of the frozen surface, packing them in sawdust, and that ice was still ice in August. General Electric's monitor top arrived in 1927, and advertising taught a generation that the icebox was an embarrassment. Fair enough, Electric won on convenience. A chest freezer full of frozen jugs in a power outage is an icebox, and the family that understands why will eat well while neighbors order pizza. Fourth pattern break, the last one. 5 to go. Down to 5, neighbor. And every one of these last 5, somebody in a suit made a decision. Number 4 is the potato hole I promised at the top. Number 1 is what all 24 have been pointing at. Kentucky, 1928. Yesterday's milk in a stoneware crock thickening into clabber, spooned like yogurt, turned into biscuits by noon. Then pasteurization became the law of commerce. A whole generation was taught that anything soured at room temperature was poison, and the culture crock died of fear, not failure. Take the pasteurized milk they sold you, add a spoon of live cultured buttermilk, jar it warm overnight, and you have the crock back. That one they scared off. The next one is number 4, the $0 root cellar you dig in an afternoon. A Nebraska field corner, November 1920. Your great-grandfather digs a shallow basin, floors it with straw, mounds 500 pounds of potatoes, blankets them in straw, buries them under soil, and leaves a twist of straw poking out to breathe. That is a clamp. The earth holds it all winter. Total cost, a bale of straw and an afternoon. Then the post-war decades handed us the $1,400 plug-in root cellar. 500 pounds, a bale of straw. Nobody sends a bill to a hole in the ground. Walk any plain farm in November and you will find the mounds. That one they simply stopped teaching. The next one your grandmother did every August, and one scare campaign talked your mother out of it. An August kitchen, 1932, steam on the windows, mason jars of peaches going down into the boiling water kettle, lids pinging like little bells. Then botulism warnings hardened into the idea that canning itself was a gamble. A generation put the kettle away, and Campbell's rang the register. The United States Department of Agriculture says the boiling water bath is safe for high-acid foods with tested recipes. The peach does not know what decade it is. That one they scared quiet. The next one they took to the Supreme Court. Ohio, September 1936. Your grandfather lets the best tomato go soft on purpose, ferments seeds in a cup, dries them on newsprint, and folds them into an envelope in a shed. The pantry, friends, starts in an envelope. Then the Plant Variety Protection Act of 1970 brought patented genetics, leading to the Supreme Court confirming companies control saved seed. The seed companies sell hybrids that will not breed true. The seed is older than the patent, neighbor. Which brings us to number one. And number one is what every one of the 24 before it was pointing at. Ansel Gray came through that winter with 3 fed children. The sand bin, the lime crock, the kraut, the barrel, the clamp, the envelope of seeds were bricks in the wall of sovereignty. A kitchen that cannot be shut off. A family whose supper does not depend on a truck, a grid, a shelf, or a price. In the winter of 1930, when men stood in bread lines, Ansel Gray was 73, eating breakfast out of his own cellar on the same claim. He died the next year in a house he had built on land nobody could foreclose. He was not lucky, friend. He was sovereign. That is number one, and it was never for sale. Now hear me plain before we close. I am not selling you collapse. The stores are open. The only thing missing is the part of you that could feed your own table for a season, and that part is just untrained. So pick one. Save your bacon grease in a jar, wrap apples in newspaper, stir a spoon of buttermilk into milk, or string some beans. I dug a clamp behind my barn last November, 300 pounds of potatoes, 1 bale of straw. That is the math. Tell me down below, which of these 25 did your family actually do? The one with the most replies is the one I build the next full video around. Your people knew every one of these. Mine never put them down, and now they are yours again. Do not let them die on your watch. Next time on this channel, the 2-cent white powder that raised every biscuit on the American frontier and the year a trust set out to corner it. This is not a cooking channel, friend. It is a root cellar with the door propped open. Tap subscribe and keep what kept us.